All right. Thanks again to our sponsors. And please go and say thank you for helping Dave Cooper Live survive and bring all of these great conversations to all of you around the world. So without further ado, let's bring on Craig Curtis to the show. Craig, how are you today?
Very good. Thanks, Dave.
Well, this is awesome to have you on the show. You were able to join us in the early years over, I guess it's over almost 3 years now, onto the show. And we were talking about CLT back then and talking about all the great work you were doing at Katerra. Before we get into what you're doing now with Mithun, I think it would be really good because we have a much bigger audience now for you to give a little bit of background on who you are, what you've been up to. We want to know everything from the moment you were born to this very moment in time, Craig. Don't leave out any of the good stuff from the hospital, or we will have somebody on this show that'll tell us all about it. But you only got 2 minutes to do it, so the floor is yours.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to fast forward then, Dave. I'm not going to go back to being born in a small town of Tonasket, Washington, and up in north central Washington State, a super small logging town. Maybe that's where I fell in love with timber when I was working summers for the U.S. Forest Service growing up there. But I will say that your introduction caught my ear because you talk about how it's, mass timber is no longer emerging. Here you see my title, Director of Emerging Building Technologies. I have to admit, when I was at the Mass Timber Conference, I thought I might have to change my title. It's no longer emerging. I mean, it was incredible. So we spoke a few years ago when I was at Katerra. I spent 5 years there. I was when I joined the company, there were only 40 people. It was a supply chain company. I was the first architect hired to build up an architecture team to do building platforms. An amazing 5-year run. And at the end of that, it didn't quite end the way I had hoped, of course. We'll talk about a lot of that later. But I ended up in a really great place with a firm that I actually had done a bunch of work with when I was at Katerra. So I knew this is the place I wanted to land if I ever decided to leave Katerra. And so here I am at Mithun. They've been super supportive of advancing our mass timber work, pursuing building platform work. So it's just going great.
Yeah, you know what? You've always been a leader and innovator in this space, and whether it's emerging or not, I think you're always emerging with your ideas and your thoughts and how we're building. So I think you should keep your title is what I'm trying to tell you. Outside of that, your 5 years at Katerra, you said that it changed the view of architecture after being in the field for 30 years. How did it change your view of architecture?
It illuminated the fact that this industry is so backwards. When you look at the productivity gains in construction, and I'm sure most of your audience is probably very familiar with that McKinsey report that came out. It's probably been 8 years ago now, that showed that since World War II, the productivity gains in construction relatively flat, the worst of any industry in the entire world, worse than mining. So it's pretty pathetic that we haven't been able to increase productivity, and it's our fault, right? I mean, as an architect, I think, yeah, we're pretty much designing things the same way we were before. Yeah, we use technology. We're just producing more drawings because it's easier to produce more drawings, but it's not making anything go any faster. So this idea of designing a platform, like our CEO came from the consumer electronics business, and using that as a model was just fascinating to me, to think how you could still have creativity in design, but not start over with every single project. Every project does not have to be bespoke. And that's what's super exciting to me, is to see some of these platform companies really taking off.
Sure. And with the platform companies, do you see today's architects also needing an engineering degree, or can the architects do it, especially if we're designing to a platform approach?
I think, one thing that's evolved in my career over the last maybe, 15, 20 years is the integrated solutions, and how important it is to do high performing buildings. You have to work super closely with your engineering team, right? More so than ever before. And I find that really enjoyable and fascinating, and it makes for much better projects. And so I think it's an evolution of that same idea, that we're working more to, up front in the very beginning, it's not an architect coming up with an idea, it's an architect alongside the engineering team coming up
Right.
with an idea.
Yeah. So, as we move forward in this conversation, we're going to get into what this platform approach is and some of the things that you visited. So we have a whole presentation for you out there. We're going to share some photos and some things that Craig was doing over in Europe, which I think is going to be really inspiring for others to see. But before we get into that, Craig, let's talk about Methune. What is Methune? What do you guys do? Who are your customers? What do you focus on? And really, what's the culture like?
Yeah. Well, maybe start by saying that the reason I ended up here, when I was at Katerra, we were trying to scale, and we were scaling like crazy. It was insane, but we couldn't do everything that our CEO wanted us to do. I mean, he had so many things on our plate. So one of the initiatives he wanted to push forward was a platform designed for mass timber-based student housing. So we didn't have in-house expertise. So I went out and hired Methune. Methune are absolute experts. They've done thousands of units of student housing. So I hired them to help us develop this mass timber platform for student housing in various scales, small, medium, large, 5 stories, 8 stories, 12, 18 stories. And working with our factory that at that time was in design, not even under construction yet, but we were building a factory to build our own CLT panels at the same time, trying to develop these platforms so that when the factory opened, we had products that we were going to be able to make sure that our panels and our, all the specifications for our factory were geared toward projects that we saw a future for. And student housing to me is one that is absolutely ripe for mass timber. It's, repeatable, small spans, it's really, straightforward systems-based architecture. And so that relationship I built with Methune in my early days of Katerra gave me an insight into this company. I saw how forward-looking they were, future-focused, investing a lot in R&D, and really supportive of trying to do things in a new way. So when I decided to leave Katerra, it was natural for me to just pick up the phone and say, hey, Dave, I've really enjoyed working with you, with me as your client, but now would you hire me as your employee? And it's worked out great.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. So being that you were at Katerra and you were really focused on systemized approaches, platform approaches, and this is going back to a conversation we had Monday. We had Scott Bridger on from ProSet, modular set teams that are out of Denver, but do a lot of work in California. How important is it with your knowledge you have today to get stakeholders of a project, especially the architects, the set crews, the staging ideas on how these are being delivered and set? How important is that in regards to the planning of these projects?
Yeah, it's super important. And we've done some volumetric modular. We did a project down in California, the Bay Area, that was a volumetric modular project on Treasure Island. But I wouldn't say we have a ton of experience with setting volumetric, but what we do have a lot of experience with is on the mass timber side. And so if maybe I step away from the volumetric for a minute and talk about, to me, mass timber represents the best of offsite manufacturing. Yep. It has everything going for it. It's large format, incredible precision, made in a very safe factory with very few people, really leveraging the technology to create these panels. And then it's, of course, assembled in the field with very few people and very rapidly. So it's everything that it's supposed to do. But having that relationship with the manufacturer and also with the contractor to handle logistics up front is super important. And that's what I find so exciting about working with mass timber. It's all new. It's, we're inventing this as we go. And, it's been around in Europe for much longer than it has been in North America. But there are so many advances being made in mass timber. And it's just exciting to be part of that development as we figure this thing out together.
Yeah, there is a lot of advancement in mass timber. In fact, it seems like it's the talk of everything right now. The Mass Timber Conference, I think, is growing leaps and bounds even. So it's super exciting to see mass timber, not only in its own form, but all the hybrid approaches it's now taken part with as well. Do you do the hybrid approach as well, or do you just focus on the mass timber itself?
No, I'm a big fan of hybrid as well. I saw one of your sponsors is Cold Form Steel. I think that you see that picking up where you might have a combination of load bearing cold form steel walls and CLT floor slabs. I think that combination makes a lot of sense. You don't see it a lot yet, but I have a feeling that that's a market that has a lot of potential to grow. In terms of speed, you probably can't do a type 3 building any faster than if you were going to do prefabricated cold form steel bearing walls and CLT floor slabs. It's just in terms of eliminating labor. So I think there's a lot of potential there. You see Thomas Robinson and Lever Architects with that beautiful project they did for Adidas down in Portland, Oregon, precast concrete and mass timber in combination. And it's absolutely beautiful. Lots of steel and mass timber hybrids around. Absolutely. Use the material where it makes sense. If you've got long span requirements, you can't beat steel. But then again, you can't beat the speed and reduction in labor of putting up CLT floor slabs as at the same time.
What do you think's driving mass timber right now and this hybrid approach, or just in general? Why are we seeing this growth and this emergence of it coming back as fast as it's coming back?
Well, of course, most people point immediately to the carbon reduction. And so I think companies with strong stated ESG goals or stated carbon footprint reduction targets that they've made public and they have to hit for their shareholders, I think that's definitely one of the drivers. But I think the one thing to me that has evolved over the last few years I find super interesting is the research that's going into the biophilic advantages of working in a building that's filled with exposed mass timber. Mm-hmm. And the research is showing that productivity is higher, absenteeism is lower, test scores are higher in schools. Your stress, your heart variability rate actually goes up, which means you have less stress. So it's been proven, physiological testing proven, that people are happier and less stressed out if you're surrounded by natural materials, and those natural material can be wood. So I think that when you look at a company like Google investing millions of dollars into mass timber buildings, these two beautiful buildings that Michael Green designed down in California, they're incredible. And it's of course it's carbon, but it's also the fact that their biggest investment is their employees and their salaries. If you increase productivity by a couple of percentage points, you've absolutely paid for any additional cost to go mass timber. There's no question.
Yeah, for sure. Recently, outside of just designing, you took a trip over to Europe, and I think there's some pictures and so forth, slides or whatever that you would like to share with us. Why did you go to Europe? I mean, what was the purpose of the trip? And then why don't we hop into talking about some of the things that you saw there, and how this approach of how they're doing it is changing how we're thinking here in the United States.
Yeah. Well, the trip was to go visit with a company, Binderholz, and they're the largest manufacturer of CLT in the world. We're actually doing some work for them on their sites, their sawmill sites out in North Carolina and Florida. And so I wanted to go over and meet with them regarding the contract and scope of work for those projects. But it also gave me an opportunity to tour their facilities. I saw their new glulam facility, which was unreal. The amount of optimization and automation in there was incredible. And then I got inside the B Solution Factory, which is something that I've been following for years. Ever since I got introduced to Helmut at a mass timber conference 7 or 8 years ago, I've been following this progress. And to walk in that factory and see what they're doing, I thought, oh my God, this is what we were trying to do at Katerra. And they're actually doing it. And it's real, and it's happening. And eventually that technology will be coming with them over here to the U.S. And I can't wait for that to get here, along with other companies who are doing the same thing.
You know, this is exciting, right? Because I sit there and I see the smile on your face when you talk about some of these things. And, you know, even Katerra, the CLT plant, you know, that was out there and Mercer took over. It's got to really make you feel good because you had such involvement in a lot of these things to see that, you know, it hasn't gone to the wayside. It's just coming back in a different format. Even with Binderholz, right? You know, I know they're definitely looking at the U.S. market. Is there anything that we should expect to see from them here in the U.S. market? Are they going to be focused on opening up CLT factories, or are they in the raw material? Tell us a little bit about who they are and what they do.
Yeah, well, you know, they bought those 2 mills and they're in operation now. We're doing a couple of buildings for them, not manufacturing buildings. So I don't want anyone to get the idea that we're building a CLT plant on either one of those sites. That's not happening yet. But I'm sure it's no secret to anyone that KLH, Stora Enso, Binder, they're all, of course, looking at the North American market because it's huge. And there will be, you know, plants. I'm, you know, certain over, if you look out 10 or 20 years, of course, I would expect to see the big European manufacturers. They will have operations over here in North America somewhere. Just makes a lot of sense. And if the demand is there, it's going to be there. And they're already supplying, all 3 of those companies I just mentioned are all providing material for projects in the U.S. now. And I think that will just continue to grow. Yeah, let me see. So you were asking about, maybe one more thing to mention about Mercer. I'm glad you brought that up because I was just over at the factory and it was humming. And Jason Herman, your plant manager, was there. He was, of course, he ran the plant when I was at Katerra, and I worked with him very closely to develop that first plant. And it was awesome to see it running. They were pressing panels while we were there. They were actually doing one with Southern Pine because they've got a big project in the Southeast using Southern Pine. So, I would say, and I told this to Jason when I saw him, that when I look back at my 5 years at Katerra, the thing that I am probably most proud of, it's that CLT plant. You know, there were a lot of other things that I, you know, enjoyed, but you know,
I'll let you in on a little secret about that plant and Todd. So the International Builder Show, this should make you happy. I was asked to do a demonstration on the main stage, and I used the Mercer CLT product, Todd Bayreuther. They put a whole kit together and we put it together, and it was funny. We were putting it together for the show, and it was built to 0 millimeters tolerance, right? Which is great on a nice square flat table. But that's only this. It was funny. You should have seen us on the floor. We got it together. It was perfect. So I don't know if you know this, but something that you helped be a part of, I actually was able to demonstrate just a few months ago on the big stage at the International Builders Show, which we're seeing a bigger presence for industrialized offsite CLT, all of that stuff at that show. So next year there's going to be more. So stay tuned.
Nice. Yeah, I love it.
Craig, let's get into some of the European tour. You want to share some of the slides and we can kind of go through and talk about what we're looking at here?
You bet.
Perfect. He's going to pull that up and we'll have that for you in just 1 second.
Okay.
There it is.
Yeah, so if everyone can see the screen here, this is actually a little mock-up at the factory there in Fugen, Austria. And then here's inside the B Solution factory. And so what you're seeing is, of course, all these, it's like a flat pack solution, all these components being put together. The one exception, it's flat pack with the exception of they call the bathroom pods, these B pods, they're load bearing. And so here's some of the, you know, the fully assembled wall panels with all the electrical plumbing inside.
So can I ask you some questions while you're going through it?
Yeah, you bet.
So when you say the full panels, right, and then you mentioned plumbing, so they are including MEPs within the wall structure and system. Can you share what that wall system is? Is it just CLT and they've mitered it out and put these things in, or is there layers to this?
Double layer of CLT with insulation. All the wiring is inside. I probably misspoke a little bit on the plumbing because these things are laid out in a way that's super smart where all of the plumbing is really
I got
tucked into these load-bearing pods. So this is a bathroom pod. You can see 5-layer because you're actually putting your floor panels bearing on these walls. But
Yep.
you can see this electrical panel. All of the it's hydronic, so all of your controls for your hydronic system for radiant floor heating and cooling is included in this item as well. This is a proprietary item that they have designed, and they have someone manufacturing those for them. But it's really smart. All of the plumbing is concentrated here in these B boxes.
Great. Now, so are they like elevator shafts, or are they just mechanical shafts, or are they plumbing pods or bathroom pods, or?
Bathroom only. Bathroom, then the kitchen butts up against it.
Okay.
And so then the rest of the apartment, this is all multifamily. Rest of the apartment is really super simple. You really just need the wiring in the walls.
Yeah.
They wrap them up here right out of their factory.
I love how clean the factory was.
Oh yeah, it was incredible. Like you'd expect to see in Europe.
Yeah.
Here they are, stacking up next to the site, walls going in, windows installed, drywall, and everything is on.
Yeah.
Here's one of the B boxes. Even the exterior finish is all done. So that's a wood siding in this case. Here's an apartment building going up. Again, super exciting for me to see this and imagine that this was the dream when I was at Katerra.
Can I ask a question? If you go up to that where you can see the downward view, so what do they do for weather there? Do they have to worry about the weather, or is there a precaution that happens when they're setting these?
Yeah, I was quizzing Helmut about that. Of course, coming from the Pacific Northwest, it's a little dicey to think about all this material exposed, right? They basically plan around weather windows, and so if they've got a couple of days of decent weather, they set all the walls and they get one of these floors on, and then if they have rain, they make sure that they've got the floor panels on. They weatherproof that. And then they, wait for the next weather window and go on with the next floor.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen that. Like Sega has a product where they can just roll over top of all of that and it stays there, but you can see through it as well, which is really cool.
Exactly. These apartments are beautiful. It's a lot of exposed wood on the inside. Back to that biophilic properties of being in a building that's surrounded by wood. In Europe, they tend to cover up a lot of the walls. In the U.S., when they bring this product to the U.S., I would imagine we would be exposing a lot of that CLT, and I think just taking advantage of it. But here you see finished product.
Yeah.
This is real. It's happening. They've got a bunch of projects on the boards, including some more extensive developments with multiple buildings.
Right.
So, it was super fun to see.
You're 100% right. We were in Switzerland twice this past year touring job sites, and COVID obviously sent us home one of the times, and we got to go back after that on a group. And they cover up all that beautiful wood, and it was so shocking to us, but it's the norm for them over there. So it's kind of like us going from drop ceilings in the 60s to save heat, and now we got 10, 12-foot ceilings again, right? Yeah. I guess it just varies on what it is. You made a comment that you're seeing the Katerra vision, play out here. What do you mean by that?
Well, when I first started at Katerra, we were really focused on smaller scale multifamily projects. In fact, the last time we spoke, Dave, I think 3 years ago or whatever, we talked a lot about the garden apartment model and how little attention it gets from the A&E community, and how it's the perfect size to optimize for platform design and modular construction and repetition. And we lost that focus, unfortunately, at Katerra, and we started to go off in too many directions, in my view, and that's one of the reasons, in my opinion, the company failed. Sure. Had we stayed focused on either the garden apartment or maybe up to that 5-story building that you see, they're just prolific all over the country. Everyone needs that type of housing. Yeah. I think we'd be doing what Binderholz is doing right now. We'd be building projects at that scale, and providing housing, they're building those apartments at a cost that's unreal. Like Helmut was giving me the rundown of slab up of what it was costing to put those together, and I guarantee that would be incredibly successful as a model in the U.S. to provide affordable housing or workforce housing. That 80 to 120% AMI housing that's needed in virtually every city across the country.
Sure. We talk a lot about the platform approach, and like I said, we have so many new viewers, investors, developers, really trying to understand the industry. Can you just take a moment and explain what that truly means when we're looking at a platform approach versus the old tried and true way of building?
Yeah, absolutely. The big difference is you have a kit of parts that you're using as an architect, as an engineering team, your contractor team, that you're not starting with a blank piece of paper. You're starting with essentially a catalog of parts that can be made very efficiently in a factory. So if you think about the B solution that I was just sharing with you, there's a limitation with the height of those walls, with the length of those walls, with the type of windows, placement of the windows, based on the structural characteristics of the various materials, such as CLT. So you live within those constraints as a designer. And it doesn't mean that it's a cookie cutter approach by any means, because you still have that flexibility to arrange those pieces in a variety of ways to respond to geography or climate or zoning code or building lot lines or developers program, whatever. That's what I really like about this idea of a platform instead of and not to diss volumetric modular. There are places for that to be used for sure, student housing, affordable housing, hospitality, but as an architect, we have more creativity at our fingertips with this platform approach. So it's a kit of parts, and you work within that catalog of assemblies.
For sure. Just a few weeks ago, we had the Mass Timber Conference. What was your thoughts on the Mass Timber Conference? I believe there was over 3,000 attendees, and I think that doubled from last year. Or something like that. And I think they're getting ready to even double more for next year. I know you say it's no longer emerging, but let's compare the two. Mass Timber Conference, not emerging, but man, is it growing.
Oh man. Yeah, it was super exciting. I've been going since the very first one. And I think there were 250, maybe 300 people. I think they expected 200 and 300 showed. And it was like, oh my God, what do we do with 300 people? And, curtains were collapsing on the side and they were scrambling. But it was, it was a fantastic conference. Now 3,000, and the exhibit floor was over the top. Not only does, Vaughan provide their axe throwing area, which is, with beer served right next door, what could possibly go wrong? But you've got exhibitors now with 2-story exhibits that you're walking up and standing on a CLT floor slab and looking out over the rest of the exhibit floor. It was just incredible.
Yeah, you said even being there that you saw, 50 or so ex-Katerra people at the show, and, and all the companies that they have now gone to. And you said the same could be said, about Sidewalk Labs.
Yeah, exactly. And I've heard comparisons made, like Silicon Valley. I think this happens a lot, where you've got startups that fail, and then those people in the startups, they end up somewhere else. And so that's how you have this amazing, this kind of melting pot of all of these, incredibly talented, smart people that spin off into other companies. And I feel like that's what's happened with Katerra and Sidewalk Labs. Both of those companies ended up dissolving, but I see people from both. They were everywhere at the Mass Timber Conference. It was awesome, and spread out in all these different companies, still doing super interesting things, and just spreading that knowledge that we all gained. I mean, I was there for 5 years, and the amount I learned in that 5 years was pretty remarkable. And to be able to now apply that somewhere else is really valuable. And I see that happening with a lot of my old colleagues who were there at Katerra spinning off into Green Canopy Node or, Path House or, these other companies that are, launching and doing, similar things to what we were trying to do at Katerra.
Yeah, and I want to jump into some of those companies. Let's go to comments real quick, and then let's talk about some of these other emerging companies that you see that are out there and exciting, like some of the ones you just mentioned. But let's first go Henry Mickelberg. Did somebody say platform approach? And then there's a link to it there. Henry, good to see. I hope all is well across the pond over there. Michael Bruce, really like timber framing simplicity. Would like to see more architects specify it. You agree?
Oh yeah, it's don't worry, it's taken off. We have, I'd say the interest from our clients right now coming to us who want to know more about mass timber, it just continues to grow exponentially. We're at the end of that hockey stick on the curve of growth for mass timber. So there's no question.
Yeah, definitely no question. I mean, it's popping up everywhere right now. We got Dean Lewis from YouTube. Thanks for sharing, Craig. Honor working with you and your team. Love hearing the story from where you have been, what you are seeing now, and where you see the industry going. Perfect.
Oh, there's a great example. Dean Lewis now with Skanska, leading their mass timber work over there. Spin-off of Sidewalk Labs, right? And so there's a great example, taking that knowledge gained, within these tech companies and applying it directly, right there. Yeah, I'm working with Dean right now on a project. It's really fun. Yeah,
well, Dean, reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you. Sounds like Craig likes you, so it might be a good opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about what you do as well. So appreciate you commenting and joining the show. Well, here it is. See, it's funny. I always mention the National Association of Home Builders, or IBS, right? Here's the past chair. This is the guy who used to update the president of the United States in Washington, D.C. a couple times a year. So thanks for joining us, Greg. Dave and Craig, it sounds like the platform approach may help address housing affordability.
That is absolutely the goal, Greg. Yeah, 100%. That's really why Katerra was launched. It was housing affordability. And again, we kind of took our eye off the ball a little bit, but if we come back to it, that's what you see happening. You'd mentioned some of these companies, Dave. I'll mention one that's successful, already proving it in the US. That's Juno. They've got a project in Austin, Texas, just wrapping up.
Right.
And they've got a platform approach, mass timber backbone to their platform. And they just finished their first project and they've got more on the boards. So there you go. There's it's happening. And I think, companies like Binderholz will be providing solutions like that here in the US to address that problem. It's not only the construction cost, but design cost. We should be able to design a lot more product with the same amount of time and the same amount of fee. This may hurt for architects to hear this, but yeah, we should be able to reduce fees to do projects if we're using the same kit of parts and that catalog really well and you're able to be more productive.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'm looking at some of the other names. So we have, Nabr. Who's Nabr? Nabr.
Oh yeah, Nabr. They're another great company, Bay Area. They've got a couple of projects that they're trying to launch down there. Again, a mass timber based system, flat pack, but the components are all pre-engineered. And their idea is to scale housing in the Bay Area. The Bay Area needs workforce housing big time.
Yeah.
And so that's their mission.
Great. And then Generate. What about Generate?
Generate's a company out in Boston. John Klein started this company, and it's a little bit more of a software-based approach, but the same idea of providing architects and engineers with a systems-based approach to solve mostly housing. He's really concentrating primarily on housing as well. Again, the same mission. Let's try to drive efficiency in the way we're building housing, whether it's affordable, true affordable, or workforce housing.
Perfect. Craig, is there anything I missed? Is there anything I didn't touch on that you want to make sure all of our viewers know about?
No, it's just always a pleasure talking with you, Dave. Love you elevating the discussion around mass timber. We're just, trying to get the word out there. And again, the enthusiasm is high. We're seeing a ton of growth here in our own company at Methuen in the mass timber business across all market sectors, from student housing to institutional projects, K-12 schools, office buildings, market rate housing. It's all over the map.
I have one more question that came in. Is our supply chain and labor set up to support a platform approach currently?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. I think that if you look at any other industry, they're all much more streamlined in terms of supply chain. Really, the beauty of it is you're focusing more. So you've got instead of like the Home Depot approach to you can pick anything you want. You have a select list of things. It's like picking out the interior of an automobile, right? Right. So you've got a smaller, more focused supply chain that works for your platform, and you curate it and you evolve it over time. And I think that's the future.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, we appreciate you joining us today on the show. This has been an amazing opportunity to have you back, Craig. It's always inspiring. I did hear that you were thinking and hoping to be at IWBCC this year. I know, just for everybody to know out there, registration is going to open soon for that. So I would get in early. There's only so much space, and last year it grew and grew and grew. So just another great conference where we talk about, the industrialized wood construction industry with the biggest players. And Craig, hopefully you're going to be there to join us for those conversations as well.
I'm planning on it. I'll see you there, Dave.
Perfect. All right, everybody, listen, that is a wrap for today's show. So thank you very much for tuning in, and make sure you tune in this Friday. Be Public Prefab is going to be on. That's right, Edie Dillman. You don't want to miss it. Be on with Mark, Willie, and I, and we're going to actually talk about the techniques of building some of these wall systems that are designed to Passive House standards. That's this Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time. So do not miss it. Make sure you're there. And for the rest of you out there, go and say thank you to our sponsors for allowing us to bring you all these innovative conversations. Craig, don't go anywhere. I'll come back to you after the end of the show. Everybody else, it's Wednesday. That means you still got 2.5 days left to get it done. Go build it better. The week isn't over yet, so we have a chance to still make some change. We'll see you Friday. Thanks, everybody. Bye now. What an amazing show. Thank you to all of our sponsors for helping us to continue to bring all of these innovative conversations to all of you out there. Please visit them, see what they have to offer you. And as always, subscribe to the YouTube channel and ring that bell. It would mean the world to us. I'm Dave Cooper. Thanks for watching.